This week has been an absolute celebration. We got the start of a Yonko 1v1ing an Admiral in the manga. The One Piece Netflix live-action series was finally released, and contrary to what I think most of us were expecting, it actually turned out not to be a complete disaster. Plus, we got a brand new opening in the anime. So yeah, it's kind of like the One Piece marketing team was working overtime to be able to coordinate the release of 3 projects during one weekend. Now, because this new opening 25, is actually directed by none other than Megumi Ishitani, who, if you don't know who she is, she's responsible for some of the best One Piece episodes, period. She currently has 3 episodes as a director under her belt, the first one being episode 957, which is the one that showcases the news that comes out of the Reverie traveling all over the world, and we get to see different characters reacting to it. She also directed episode 982, which marks the beginning of the raid of the Alliance on Onigashima, as well as the introduction of the Topiropo, and she's also the director of episode 1015, which could arguably be considered the best One Piece episode ever. At least that's what a lot of fans said when the episode came out. As for me, what I said was that I consider that episode to be a work of art. So because it's Ishitani, I want to just kind of focus on the artistic vision of the opening, because it does start with an O, which can obviously stand for One Piece and Oden, and I'm pretty sure that the person writing the O is Momonosuke. That's the person at the desk. So the opening kind of starts and ends with him. And you can actually follow the pattern of the O throughout the opening. There are very few scenes in this opening that do not include a circular shape in the center of the frame. You got Zoro at the well with the people of Ibizu Town, now able to drink water. We have the table that Ben Beckman and Shanks are sitting at. Kid with a headache with some fireworks in the background, which I consider to be foreshadowing to what Shanks is about to do to him. You got an awesome shot of Yamato riding Momonosuke in hybrid form. And in terms of light spoilers, we get a very menacing shot of Green Bull charging up his roots, which I thought looked excellent. Plus, we also get a shot of the window that Robin and Law look out of to see the old ancient part of Wano that is underwater. Now, the song itself is actually by a pop band named Sekai no Owari, and its name is Highest Arrival, which I'm pretty sure is a reference to Luffy saying that Gear 5th is his peak. You know, highest arrival, highest point, that is the peak. Now, the thing that jumped out at me the most was the fact that we actually see Luffy in his Joy Boy form, or in his Nika form, and it seems like he's coming down from the moon. So it looks like he's coming in from outer space, and then he just breaks the atmosphere. So I think that could be another hint about Joy Boy, as well as the people of the Ancient Kingdom, not being originally from Earth, actually coming in from outer space.
And on that note, just talking about the anime, there was a 3.5-minute sequence in the middle of last night's episode that was just firing on all cylinders when it came to the animation. We had Luffy not just grabbing lightning, not just spinning on bolts of lightning, but there was a scene where he was actually using the lightning to boost up his speed to barrage Kaido. They definitely added more stuff that was in the actual manga for sure. One of the best parts of the sequence is when Luffy grabs onto a thundercloud, and he's actually upside down, so what he ends up doing is that he just puts his hand into it and just pulls down a string of lightning and just sends it down at Kaido. So that definitely reminded me of King using Imperial Flaming Wings to shoot down a string of fire magma dragons at Zoro. Other than that, the sequence is pretty funny as well. It's really comedic because it just kind of feels like Kaido's chasing Luffy with a bat all over the place. And then Luffy making funny wild faces when he gets hit or gets sent flying. But yeah, just seeing Luffy being able to use lightning that way to boost the speed of his attacks got me to think, like, is this something that he can pull against Kizaru to keep up with him?
The manga does a pretty good job at hyping up Kizaru via Sentomaru's defeat, and one of the reasons for why I would have wanted Sentomaru to be part of the Wano arc, instead of us getting that random sumo wrestler in Act 1 whose story really didn't lead anywhere, is because Sentomaru's character is actually a reference to a Japanese folklore legend. Specifically, he's a reference to a boy called Kintaro, who was a boy with superhuman strength. Him and his mother used to live in a mountain called Ashigara. Kintaro was so strong that he would be able to wrestle and defeat bears, and eventually his strength caught the attention of a samurai that lived in the capital, so the samurai was so impressed by Kintaro that he actually invited him to be part of his bodyguards. So both of those aspects were something that Oda incorporated into Sentomaru's backstory. And now that we know that it was Kizaru that actually trained Sentomaru after Sentomaru went with Vegapunk, that actually hypes up Kizaru even more. Because if Sentomaru's armament hockey guard is supposed to be the greatest in the world, then we can only imagine what that says about Kizaru, who is the one who trained Sentomaru in the first place. In my last video, I talked about how Aokiji and Kizaru would stack up against each other if they were to fight. And so given the new information that we've gotten from these most recent chapters. If Kizaru was the one who taught Sentomaru his guard, then that would sort of imply that Kizaru may have a specialty in hockey defense, whereas with Kuzan, we actually saw him match punches with Garp, which would suggest that he has more of an attack power specialty going on. And so with that in mind, I think that Kizaru working to up his defense is a very smart thing to do, because he's already able to dish out light speed kicks. Like he even says, speed is weight. So the fact that he's so fast, plus the fact that he has incredible amounts of destructive power, makes him investing in his defense something very smart, because it makes him a much more well-rounded fighter. This whole thing takes me back to Marineford, where Marco comes in with a flip kick, and Kizaru's all like, oh, this hurts, and Marco's like, you liar, don't lie. So I wonder if he already knew about Kizaru's defense back then. Now, even though we know that by all intents and purposes, Zoro should come out victorious against Rob Lucci if that 1v1 fight continues, I think it's a nice turn of events for Oda to give one of Luffy's past opponents to Zoro, and then also have Sanji deal with one of Zoro's past opponents as well. Now, I've also seen some fans take this statement from Shaki from chapter 498, where she says that Rayleigh is about 100 times stronger than the main cast is back in Sabaody, and since Luffy tells Kizaru that they are now 100 times stronger than what they were 2 years ago, it's gotten some people to think that what Luffy is saying is that Luffy is currently at old Rayleigh level, or at least at the level that Rayleigh was back when the Straw Hats were in Sabaody. And so if that's the case, then that would give us like a stall match between Luffy and Kizaru, which is interesting because one of the things that's been repeated over and over again recently is a sense of urgency about the Straw Hats escaping Egghead with Vegapunk as soon as possible. Then again, we also have the fact that Oda introduced those light gloves at the beginning of the arc, sort of foreshadowing that they might be used in combat against Kizaru if need be. If I had to bet, I'd say that whether or not the fight ends up having a clear resolution or not is going to depend on what the Blackbeard pirates end up doing in Egghead, because we know they're there and they're hiding. Oda has kept them out of the spotlight for a reason, so they should be playing a game-changing role pretty soon. Now, as for the Netflix live action, the production design team hit it out of the park when it came to the Baratie. I was staring at that food just slobbering on my screen. Oh my gosh, it's one of those places that you wish was real, because it was so well made. And if it were real, you probably would need to book a reservation 3 weeks in advance just to be able to get in. Zoro vs. Mihawk was really accurate and really well adapted. I haven't seen people complain about it so far. That clash specifically, I think, does a really good job at showing the power difference between the two. And just in general, I was honestly expecting things to look a lot cheesier, and I was pleasantly surprised by how non-cheesy a lot of things were. Luffy's Gum Gum powers were used pretty sparingly throughout the season. Like, there were moments where I would actually forget that Luffy's actor had rubber powers just because he didn't really use them that much. And I think the reason for that is twofold. Number one is the budget. And then the other reason is that adapting rubber powers in live action can look very silly. So them turning it down a notch, I think, worked in favor of the show's tone. Now, because of the 8-hour time constraint, there are some storylines that get either deleted completely or get blended in with other storylines, as well as some characters that just get erased. And so that got me thinking, since we know that Oda had to approve of all those edits and all those cuts, it kind of makes it seem as if the live action is saying that if Oda could go back in time and start the series from scratch, he would probably involve Garp and Kobe a lot more in the beginning stages of the story, and he would also give Bogart more to do, starting with acknowledging his actual name, which thankfully the live action does. I also think the live action is saying that Oda would have Buggy be more involved in the beginning stages of the story as well. Plus, if there were any doubts about Usopp and Kaya being one of the few in-canon romantic ships in the story, well, the live action pretty much obliterates them. And speaking of stuff for manga fans in the show, I've noticed that some people have pointed out this person out of the crowd from Roger's Execution, and people are saying that this is actually Crocodile. I'm not sure if I buy it though. That being said, the show is not without its flaws. In general, I thought the acting was pretty good overall, but something that did stand out to me was that it felt like Kobe had the exact same facial expression in almost every shot that he was in. And then, in terms of dialogue, I lost count of how many times Luffy says the word dream. It's my dream. What's your dream? Have you ever had a dream? I believe in my dream.
That's the ship we need to follow our dreams.
So if I could pick the perfect word to describe this Netflix live-action adaptation of One Piece, I would say that the show is harmless. It's respectful to the source material that it's based on, it's respectful to the fans that have invested an unhealthy amount of time into the story, myself included, and it's also harmless enough that if Netflix wanted to make a second season out of the series, I think a lot of people would be on board for it. So yeah, I guess we might see Jamie Lee Curtis play Kureha after all. The show also does a good job of capturing the main essence of the East Blue Saga, which, if we're being honest, given the horrible track record of live-action anime adaptations, that's pretty much the best outcome that anybody could realistically hope for at this point.
Another good thing, and granted, this is just what I've observed during the span of this weekend, but a lot of people that had previously no exposure to One Piece, just because they see it trending or they see it on the front page of Netflix, they are now watching the show. They're getting acquainted with the material. And then, of course, that's obviously going to lead to a percentage of those people, like after they binge the series or after they watch enough episodes, they're probably going to say, hey, like, I'm interested in this story. Where can I get more of this? And that'll lead them to the manga or the anime or both, whatever they decide. Now, even if those watchers, those Netflix watchers, don't transfer over to being manga readers or anime watchers, I think it's still a win because it's increasing the amount of people that know about One Piece exponentially. So even if you don't like the show, even if you think like, what was even the point of this, aside from making money, what was even the point of this whole thing? I think that if you're at the airport and you run into somebody who's watching an episode of the show on their iPad or on their phone, and that helps you strike up a conversation, I think that's a win overall because it helps us connect. My dad doesn't know anything about One Piece and he just watched the first episode. So stuff like that, you know, like it helps us connect. It helps us sort of like get a conversation going about something that we as fans already love, but now the world can love it too, or at least know about it and possibly get into it. So whether or not the show ends up being the next Wednesday or the next Stranger Things, which by the way, I think that's going to depend on the rewatchability value of the show. Because after I finished watching it, I did think to myself, is there a scene or a moment in this season that I want to rewatch repeatedly because it was so good? You know, like when you go and watch a really good movie and the movie stands out, but it's like, oh, there's this scene in this movie, or there's maybe like two scenes in this movie that I just want to look up on YouTube. That sort of stuff. I was thinking if this season had anything like that, and I was honestly like struggling to come up with an answer for that question because again, it's a harmless, respectful adaptation of the source material that it's based on. And obviously I'm a manga reader, so I'd be way more interested in knowing what like somebody that doesn't know anything about One Piece feels about the show. That being said, there were 3 things that I felt that the live action show offered to me as a manga reader, as somebody who's caught up with the story. And the first one was a full-scale map of Nami's home kingdom. Now, we already knew that Nami came from a kingdom called Oikot, which if you spell it backwards, it spells Tokyo, but I don't think we had ever gotten a map for the region before. So if you see the title of the map on the corner, it says the Sea King of the Great Oikot. So I'm wondering if this is referring to an actual Sea King that lived there, or if it's just referring to the shape of the island, which kind of looks like a Sea King. Regardless, I kind of connect that with Shirahoshi, who is capable of controlling the Sea Kings, telling Nami and Fishman Island that a part of her feels like her and Nami have been friends in the past. Another thing that I noticed is that the credits list Yasopp as Yasopp the Great. So when I read that, I was like, is that why Usopp started calling himself the Great Captain Usopp because of his dad? And finally, if you go to the last episode of the Netflix live action show, you start watching the credits, you'll see a map of the East Blue, and there's something written on one of the corners of the map, which I thought was wild. So I'm going to show it to you right now. Look at what it says. It's no joke. It says, Map of the East Blue, created for the Marines of the East Blue by the orders of Commander-in-Chief Kong. You even see a little logo of his face with his spiky hair there at the bottom of the sentence, kind of like giving this map his seal of approval. You honestly mean to tell me that it took a live-action adaptation of One Piece for this piece of to be able to do something of value? So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Kong's greatest feat is ordering the creation of some maps. Like he sent something to the printer. That is a commander-in-chief level feat. So with that in mind, my hope is that next time we see him in the manga, we might actually get to see Kong order a box of paper clips off of Amazon. That's gonna do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts about the points that I raised in the video, as well as your thoughts on the Netflix live action adaptation of One Piece. Just leave them down below and I'll read you. Take care. Have a great week. Catch you guys later.